Me tarvitaan sellaista tutkimusta, joka niin kuin lähtee tältä alueelta ja siitä tiedosta, mitä tällä alueella on.
Mä ootan, et maailma pelastuu, mut eka mä ootan, et se tuhoutuu, niin me kaikki näemme. Sitten pitikin pelätä, ei ketään jättäisi rauhaan, niin jokainen saa osansa, kun on pilattu taivaat ja meret, myrkyttänyt oman veren ihminen. Aurinko polttaa peltoja, vesi juoma kelvotonta, sade metsässä palaa, jumalauta ei auta. Mielipidekysely.
Arctic Center is a unique institution. Such a wide range of research from law to glaciology and language, and with excellent links to the indigenous Arctic peoples. Our science centre is visited by 100,000 people a year, and we're really well known globally, often the first point of call for international journalists and experts, but much less well known inside Finland, because we're out there on the Arctic Circle in Rovaniemi.
The Arctic Center is quite unique as a place for Arctic research because we host so many different disciplines, from the natural and the social sciences.
Arktisella alueella tulee nyt niin paljon mielenkiintoa ulkopuolelta, niin se on vähän jotenkin semmoinen, että muu maailma on herännyt siihen, mitä täällä ihmiset ja eläimet ja luonto on jo kokeneet pitkän aikaa.
In our team, we have been focusing since its existence on the European and Siberian Arctic, the majority of which is on the territory of Russia. So the question of what has changed since the 24th of February 2022 is very relevant. And the answer to this question is everything. Since my school years, there was a fascination with that unknown Eastern world that opened up when the Iron Curtain fell. This can't be over for good. I'm coordinating the anthropology research team that we have at the Arctic Center. I co-established it together with my colleagues in 2006, I think. I was studying anthropology in Germany. In the 1990s, much of German anthropology was about African studies. And I gradually got the feeling within year 1 and 2 that what am I going to do? Because like in Africa, it seemed to me that every square meter was already studied 150 times. But I was very much interested in nomadism. For my master thesis, I traveled the first time to Siberia and spent a summer with reindeer herders in the Siberian forests very close to an oil deposit. In anthropology, the idea is that one should learn the language in which people speak, because there is a whole colonial history of our discipline which is rather unfortunate, which we are very aware about, and we want to make sure that we distance ourselves from that. When I first got to Siberia, I think I understood maybe around 30% of what people were talking, something like that. So I could sort of get by, and I'm eternally grateful to my host back then, Juri Vella, a Forest Nannets reindeer herder, who was also an indigenous writer of novels. I think it's really crucial to understand that in anthropological fieldwork, the anthropologists are there to learn. We are the apprentices, and most of us actually start as sort of assistants of the people with whom we stay. When I first came to this Khanty-Mansi area and stayed with Juri Vella, he said, I need to dig a channel in order to go by boat to this neighboring lake from my camp. Can you please help me dig that channel? So he gave me a shovel, and I needed to dig some days into the bogs in order to make that channel so that he wouldn't need to carry his boat. That's a very typical way of how you learn about the land and about the way in which people use the land, by experiencing it with your own hands. I think the main instrument of getting data is feeling the life of people with your own body. And as you feel this, you become able to formulate the right questions to ask people. When we first traveled with Italina together in a project that was actually sponsored by a Russian university, by Italina's home university in Yakutsk. That project, it brought us to Kamchatka for the first time. We worked on this topic of the relations between reindeer herding and industry in Kamchatka, and we traveled by car to a group of reindeer herders who were having their summer camp just next to a gold deposit, where we discovered a lot of interesting topics that I had not discovered before, because Italina came there as a historical anthropologist with an education in law. And so her eyes on what was happening there between the industry and the reindeer herders was shaped by this historical view and by knowing the legal framework of the existence of different livelihoods on the same land, which made the entire experience very interesting to me, because when you travel alone as an anthropologist, we need to deliver something to those who finance us. So we appear first as those people who actually want something from the people with whom we live in the field. Whereas in that case, it was also that they had a lot of questions and they saw a nice resource in us. This is a partnership of equals, a mutual partnership between those with whom we live and us as researchers, and that we also make sure that we always are able to return a result that people will be happy with.
Вообще, это первая совместная экспедиция, она для меня, как для юриста, она вообще стала переломной, потому что одно дело изучать законы в кабинете, другое дело, когда ты работаешь с самим процессом и видишь, как реализуются законы на местах. Мы добирались до оленеводов, встретили медведя, который шел по дороге и был буквально в метре от нашей машины, и это было страшно, потому что когда приехали к оленеводам, мы спали в палатке, и ночью казалось, что этот медведь ходит вокруг этой палатки. И в данном случае у Флорина очень хороший опыт взаимодействия с людьми и очень хорошие навыки полевой практики и вообще полевой работы. С другой стороны, я не знаю, мое лицо, оно очень часто воспринимается как свое. И поэтому практически в каждом регионе, где мы бываем, будь то Канада или Норвегия, или же Камчатка, Якутия, меня всегда путают со своими, с коренным лицом, поэтому, мне кажется, взаимодействие, оно как-то становится еще более проще. Но кроме этого, безусловно, работа по этим двум направлениям антропологии и права, оно дает возможность очень хорошо воспринимать те реалий, с которыми сталкиваются люди на местах. Мы сейчас все в сложной ситуации на самом деле, но Арктика — это такой большой регион, и большая часть она находится на территории России, поэтому прекращение, наверное, всех контактов с научным сообществом было бы не полезно ни одной из сторон.
So this one here is called a malitsa, and I think it's the most ingenious piece of garment that Arctic peoples have invented. As you can see from inside, it's made of different reindeer skins. This is the malitsa of one of Yamal's greatest reindeer herders of the 20th century, Sergei Sokovich, who was a good friend of mine who passed away 2 years ago. In his last summer, as a farewell gift, he gave me this. This is his malitsa. You have the inbuilt gloves, and whenever you do something, you do this, and then you go back, and we use a piece of reindeer skin, and we sit in the snow, and we write the stuff. The most important thing to pack is the presents from here for the friends. Very popular present is the knives. The knives from Lapland, they are highly valued, and the reindeer herders know them as well. My coldest ever field work was at -54, and the notes that I took there, they are with pencil, because that's the only thing that writes. Everything else freezes. We are very connected to the people in the field, and we have these friendships that are long-lasting, and of course we are worried, like friends are worried when other friends are in trouble. Unfortunately, accidents happen. I have had cases where somebody I knew very well committed suicide. We become witnesses of tragedies that are also caused by us here in the West. Most of the gas in Europe came from Yamal. Yamal is that region where we work with the reindeer herders. So people heating their houses in Germany or somewhere, maybe in Helsinki, where there is gas connection, they heat it with Yamal gas. So there is a certain moral responsibility from us as gas customers for the conditions under which that gas was extracted. I also want to transport a positive story that there is actually this nomadic culture of reindeer herders that has persisted, that has continued in spite of all these difficulties, and that actually people like Sergei Sokovich, in whose malitsa I sit now, he was instrumental for organizing that reindeer herding could continue in spite of the advancing of the gas industry. When talking to colleagues from other fields who were asking, well, is your work actually a science? Because it's not objective. You talk to these people. How do you answer questions like that? Have you been encountering that too?
It's not so objectified, but this is the only way to explore the feeling or feeling emotion. Subjective and objective is one criteria. Even for hard science, for astronomy, how they can experiment. They only rely on the observation.
In a world where so much changes, sometimes when you look at it more closely, the most surprising thing is that people still manage to continue their lives, even though everything around them is turning upside down. Still now, as of 2022, we have groups of fully nomadic reindeer herders migrating in the Arctic, living together with their animals in this incredible environment, which is home for them. It's harsh for us, but it's home for them, so they don't consider it as extreme as we do. The climate is changing, the industry is advancing, states are encroaching, all kinds of laws that are prohibitive, all this stuff, and still they manage to continue that way of life. And I think that continuity is quite amazing. It's a very useful approach to also have at home. You don't get out of your rails when something changes and you need to adjust your plans, because that living together with the natural environment that I have been witnessing together with the reindeer herders and fishermen and hunters and also people in villages and towns is that loads of unpredictable things happening in the environment. The entire approach that whatever happens outside, you can quickly adjust within minutes your entire life to whatever is happening. And I think it's part of the secret of why this livelihood works, and I find it very useful for myself as well. I realized that my team is probably among the best equipped and prepared to still continue working with Russian partners. We speak the language, some of us have double citizenship and thus will not need visas. We are free to enter Russia and go domestically inside Russia where we want. We do not depend on planes or trains because we can drive our own cars over the border as long as the border is open. It would feel like surrendering if we could just stop including the Russian Arctic in our Arctic studies. And this would be a huge loss for science altogether. In fact, each research site is different, of course, and each research site is unique. And that's much to the point of what Arctic anthropology is all about. One key part is documenting the social and cultural diversity on our planet. And we believe that it is just as important as documenting the biological diversity and the diversity of ecosystems on Earth. And this should be a task beyond any political currents, regimes, wars, and peace. And it would be nice to continue this at all times. This is more than about business trips. It's about lifelong relations that we enter when we first enter a field site. We make huge investments in these field partnerships, into our social capital, and they last. They usually last beyond particular research projects, they become personal, and they last longer than electoral periods or policies. And hopefully they last longer than wars too. I therefore try not to touch that political hot potato and rather continue maintaining these relations at a distance, hoping that the crisis will be over at some point.
I would usually sit outside my hotel and watch the tips of the icebergs floating just over the mountain which I was looking at. Suddenly one day, like 20 or 25 years ago, I was sitting at the same place and I didn't see any icebergs. I used to look at those icebergs like it was mountains of rock.
The topic of geoengineering is provocative, evoking quasi-religious thoughts in some people. And indeed it is crazy. I often liken it to an alcoholic opting for a liver transplant instead of giving up the booze. But this is what humanity has been doing for generations. Geoengineering is the deliberate alteration of our global climate. And this is exactly what emitting greenhouse gases is doing. We've long known that. Every person that says, "Hands off beautiful, innocent nature," or "Why would anyone want to interfere in such a delicate system?" must ask themselves, what have they been doing their whole life? Equally, everyone that agrees with "drill baby drill" must know what the consequences of this rapacious greed will be for their children. I very much respect and admire Greta Thunberg and her fellow activists like Extinction Rebellion, who are doing great things. Greta is against geoengineering. For me, that makes no sense. There is simply no going back in time. There is not an option to choose some idyllic pre-industrial natural world.
Tutkimme professori John Mooren kanssa merenpinnan nousun hidastamiseen tähtäävän menetelmän käyttöä Ilulissatissa Grönlannissa. Menetelmässä rakennettaisiin merenpohjaan jäävuonon suulle verho, jolla rajoitettaisiin lämpimän meriveden pääsyä jäätikön luo sen sulamisen hidastamiseksi. Myöhemmässä vaiheessa menetelmää voitaisiin käyttää Etelämantereella, jonka jäätiköiden sulaminen nostaisi merenpintaa vielä enemmän.
A lot of money, and in addition to that, there is going to be many people that are forced to leave their homes simply because they become flooded. The idea is that we might use something like this curtain to limit the outflow from the ice sheet.
Some of the pictures, for example, the next star picture to the right, you can see a very skinny, hungry polar bear.
So I've been in Greenland 3 times during the past year. So first for meeting Julius and for building trust with the community. And now in April and May, I spent 2.5 weeks in Greenland, again talking with locals. Last week we went back to Ilulissat. Okay. So we found out that the 2 key livelihoods that need to be considered in this regard are tourism and fisheries. One of the opportunities that tourism saw here would be that would this be a way to tell the visitors that Greenland is doing its bit to find global sea level rise in this. So basically other questions are, what's in it for Greenland and why should Greenland be interested? It's not Greenlanders who cause climate change. Why should they help others? So yeah, and there are much more kind of detailed questions regarding the material of the curtain and will there be microplastics and like that.
Well, especially rain and humidity are a big problem for fishermen because the weather's becoming more and more unpredictable.
If the level of the warm water rises high enough, it can spill over this bedrock high at the end of the fjord in this case.
Of course, we see and feel the impacts of the climate change. Usually I would say I look out the window and I see the climate changing. And being an Arctic Inuit, living in nature, by nature, with nature, it is of course a serious issue.
I think it's really fun working with John. Yeah.
Even when I'm grumpy?
Yeah, even then, almost. Not at all days.
Fun to laugh at John sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that this collaboration works really well, and approaching to these questions from both natural sciences and social sciences perspectives and combining them.
I've learned so much from being in the field with Ilona, you know? As a natural scientist, in a sense, the carbon-based life forms were very much something that was there, but not really a part of the problem. But now I've truly learned to understand it's impossible to look at the nature without considering the people that are there as well.
I see that this has actually roots in the way how we do things at the Arctic Center.
This kind of idea that you can always learn from the guy down the corridor as much as you can from somebody on the other side of the world. But a lot of this has been done to date as a kind of hobby. Very few people have been funded. More or less Ilona's the only one that's got funding from this. And that has to change. We have lots of things to be worried about. We don't know if our ideas will even work. It may work in the sense of slowing down and reversing the melting glacier, but it might not work when it comes to fishing and traditional jobs, and there is no way that we are going to make the situation worse.
All climate intervention methods are kind of more or less controversial research topics, and there are some organizations and people who as a principle oppose anything like that. But there seems to be an increasing understanding among people that this is something that actually does need to be studied in case we need it at some point.
The cure must not be worse than the disease.
Joko? Joo. Okay. Ilmastonmuokkaus on tutkimusaiheena äärimmäisen kiehtova. Osa menetelmistä kuulostaa olevan lähellä science fictionia, kun taas osa perustuu jo tutummaksi tulleeseen teknologiaan. Yhteistä kaikille on yritys rajoittaa ilmastonmuutoksen haittoja, jotta peruuttamattomia muutoksia vaikkapa jäätiköissä ei ehtisi tapahtua ennen kuin päästövähennykset ehtivät auttaa. Joskus tuntuu, että ilmastokeskustelussa ajatellaan, että yhden menetelmän pitäisi ratkaista koko ongelma kerralla, eikä vaihtoehtoisista, vähäpäästöisemmistä ratkaisuista saisi aiheutua mitään haittoja, jotta niitä ylipäätään voitaisiin lähteä tekemään. Ratkaisuna ilmastokriisiin saattaa olla jopa kaikkien strategisten ratkaisujen yhdistelmä, hillintää, sopeutumista niihin vaikutuksiin, joita ei voida enää välttää, sekä ilmastonmuokkausta. Tämä saattaa vähentää kärsimystä ja menetyksiä, jopa kuolemia, joita ilmastonmuutos tuo mukanaan.
Imagine that you're having a lovely drink, your gin and tonic or your soda, and you've got ice in it. At what point in time do you say, my ice is nearly run out? When do you need to put more ice into your drink? Like now? That's the problem we've got. And whether we think it's going to be in the next 10 years or the next 20 years or the next 30 years, our great-grandchildren won't care very much. It disappeared while we were in charge.
So, good morning everyone. I'm Ant and this is Aada. We are activists from Finland from a project called Operatio Arktis. Just to say first that we understand this is far from simple, this whole issue, and we know it's very controversial, and that's the main reason for why we are here. So, stay under 2 degrees to avoid a catastrophe. That's the international slogan, right? Everybody knows about this. But it's also a lie, because we now know that even 1.5 degrees of global warming is catastrophic. According to a recent study published in Science, 1.5 degrees of warming means the probable tipping of 4 major Earth elements. 2 of these are in the Arctic. That means that some global tipping points are virtually unavoidable without climate repair measures. That's why we have to really consider it. To simply accept the damage that's already unavoidable without climate repair is an act of violence against our generation and our children's generation.
When we discuss risks in deploying climate repair, we must always talk about and recognize the risks in not doing it. Think about a difficult, high-risk surgical operation. You wouldn't take it unless there's a good reason for it. But once there is, you would at least consider it. And you would do your everything to understand what the actual risks are and how to best avoid them.
Now, whose Arctic is it to refreeze? Who should be heard? What kind of interest should be considered? There is a risk that climate intervention, if it's ever deployed, would be the new type of colonialism. And this is something we absolutely must avoid.
Targeted geoengineering may avoid some of the erroneous psychological connotations of global geoengineering, but it does provoke strong reactions among some because in their minds it distracts from mitigation efforts. This moral hazard argument is becoming ever more moot. No one doubts that emissions reductions is the most urgent priority, but reducing sea level rise threat will take more than that. Let's take the example of conserving the Greenland ice sheet. We have a potential method of stabilizing or slowing down the loss of parts of the ice sheet. Maybe it would work even better for the Antarctic ice sheet. A successful intervention would directly benefit 200 million people across the world who will be forced to move when the rising seas flood their homes and fields. It would indirectly benefit practically everyone through reduced global migration and resource stress. Fishing is indeed important in Ilulissat. It generates around $40 million per year in income. But there is no fishing industry in northeast Greenland. We wanted to do the preliminary project in Ilulissat precisely because of all the complicating issues. There are many other things besides fishing, and we're talking to the locals and the Nuuk government about all of them. But it's by no means the only option. It's entirely Greenland's choice.
Operaatio Arktis on tällainen projekti, jossa me muutetaan sitä tapaa, miten yhteiskunnat suhtautuu ensinnäkin äärimmäisiin ilmastoriskeihin, mutta toiseksi myös me halutaan tuoda yhteiskunnalliseen ajatteluun se pointti, että me tarvitaan ilmastonkorjaustutkimusta, koska se mitä tällä hetkellä voidaan vielä saavuttaa vähentämällä päästöjä, niin se ei ole enää mitenkään kestävä tai eettisesti hyväksyttävä lopputulos. Me koitetaan jotenkin tuoda tällainen aktivistin lähestymistapa ja vähän tämmöinen systeemiajattelu yhteen ja sitten muuttaa yhteiskunnallista keskustelua siitä kautta.
Me operaatio Arktiksena puhutaan siitä, mistä suurin osa järjestöistä tai porukoista tai ylipäätään ei puhu, eli se, että ne päästövähennykset ei enää riitä, eikä ne missään nimessä takaa meille tai saatiin haavoittuvimmilla alueilla asuville ihmisille turvaa.
Siinä kävi silleen, että me viime talvena päätettiin vähän lähteä puhtaalta pöydältä, että mitä täytyy tapahtua tässä yhteiskunnassa. Ja sitten tosi nopea tuli se ajatus, että okei, että tämä ilmastonkorjaus, ilmastonmuokkaus on nyt akuutti teema. Ja sitten mä rupesin itse googlaamaan, että onko Suomessa ketään tyyppejä, jotka tekee tätä. John Moren nimi pomppasi jostain tyyli ihan Google-hausta esiin. Ja sitten mä olin silleen, okei, tosi siistiä. Sitten mä vaan oikeastaan pistin viestiä sille sähköpostiin. Ja se vastasi tyyli heti. Ja sitten mä olin silleen, nice. John ja Ilona molemmat, niillä on selkeästi tosi voimakas halu tehdä asiat just niin hyvin kuin ne voi tehdä. Että ne ei silleen vedä mitään mutkia suoriksi. Ja se on tosi siistiä. Ja se on sellainen juttu, mitä ei todellakaan kaikissa ilmastonkorjausprojekteissa ole tehty. Se, mikä onkin mielenkiintoista ja outoa, kun on puhunut ilmastonmuokkaustutkijoiden kanssa, on just se, että ne puhuu siitä, että ne vois tehdä juttuja, mutta niillä ei ole vaan rahaa. Ja sitten miettii silleen, että mihin kaikkeen ihan paskaan pistetään ihan järjettömiä määriä rahaa. Mutta sitten ihmisille, jotka tutkii noin tärkeitä kysymyksiä, niin ne ei saa edes kunnon resursseja siihen. Siis mä ajattelen tälleen, että se ei ole mulle täysin vapaa valinta, mitä mä teen, koska mä en kestäisi itteeni siinä tilanteessa.
Se oma passiivisuus tuntuu vaan niin väkivaltaiselta niin montaa ihmistä kohtaan. Musta se tuhoaa meitä sisältä, jos me ei tavallaan toimita enemmän sen jotenkin rakkauden kautta.
Se on paras mahdollinen elämä, mitä voi elää tietyllä tavalla. Ja et siinä on tosi paljon kaikkea hienoa ja nautintoa ja kivaa. Et se ei ole sellainen jotenkin jatkuva kärsimys ja uhraus tietyllä tavalla. Vaan se on enemmänkin tosi merkityksellisen tuntusta ja se on jotenkin mahtavaa.
Well, first of all, there's been huge media attention.
We've also had quite an interesting follow-up with the University of the Arctic, who want us to do a general evaluation on different interventions that might work in the Arctic, and also if the Arctic is a suitable place to try to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and store. The funding for this is just as important as the engineering or practically any other aspect. Of course, it should come from the people who are responsible for the project in the end, which is the rich, wealthy countries that have put most of the greenhouse gases into the world. At the beginning level, it's likely to come from rich individuals that want to save the world, benefit humanity in some way by funding this kind of research.
One idea is also that because tourism to Greenland is growing and always traveling to Greenland causes emissions, well, as traveling anywhere does. So maybe these tourists would like to pay a small fee for fighting sea level rise.
It's important to understand that any kinds of geoengineering intervention are not off-the-shelf solutions that exist readily now. They will take a decade, perhaps several decades, to become engineeringly viable, safe options. So it's very, very important to be doing this research basically from now, as soon as possible. Because if you're not careful, if there are some catastrophic events in future, and we know, of course, there will be, there can be a panicky response. Oh, we must do something now. But the solutions are still not ready. But people will just take the risk and okay, we have to do it. We have to do it. And that's not a safe way of going forwards, is it?
Precisely.
Operation Arctis are very expert, I think, at understanding how to motivate people to change. And that's something that's really impressed me. It's very humbling when people are willing to do that kind of things. As long as we do our best and we always tell the truth, then I hope more and more people will want to be motivated in similar ways.
Not everybody has to be a scientist to try to save the world.
Yeah.
Here at the Arctic Center, we talk about the Arctic Center family. So it's a very close community. I've been working here for more than 10 years, and there are some really close colleagues. I would even consider friends. We are supportive, we are open to new ideas. There's a lot of good discussions around the coffee table.
there's a gummy bear on the floor, and there's a lot of different ways of organizing your cups, and this enormous jigsaw, which I try to avoid doing at every opportunity.
No, you. I always try to seize the opportunity.
Yeah, it's you can learn a lot around the coffee table.
Absolutely, that's really the place to be if you want to know things first.
They're supposed to be muted. Hello? Hello, no, it's some bloody monkeys trying to sell me some shit. Two of my heroes are Carl Sagan and Fridtjof Nansen. They both shared a love and deep curiosity about nature and humanity's future place as part of it. What I want to do in my own work is try for their depth of understanding, while also remembering that what we do is for real people. This work is, of course, not the end of the story. It's rather more a call for a research effort on this and other critically important issues. This is the triage component of targeted geoengineering. There is a high likelihood that society will be faced with ice sheet collapse this century. Moving the conversation forward from ascertaining what rates of sea level rise to expect towards potentially limiting sea level rise threats is, we believe, a duty of care by the scientific community towards the global south.
Eihän tähän nyt olla vaan hupsis vaan jouduttu. Ihmiset ovat ihan itse tämän asian tehneet, missä me nyt ollaan. Se mahdollisuus on niin kuin siinä, että jos me nyt katsotaan, että miten meni noin niin kuin omasta mielestä, tehdään se tilinteko siitä ja sitten mietitään, että no tämä nyt ei ehkä toiminutkaan.
Jos joku olisi sanonut mulle 20 vuotta sitten, että mä päädyn tutkijaksi ja että mä päädyn tutkimaan pohjoisia tai arktisia kysymyksiä, niin mä olisin ehkä naurahtanut, no ei tää mua kyllä kiinnosta yhtään. Mä oon Heidi Sinevaara-Niskanen, työskentelen Lapin yliopistolla. Sitten mulla on vähän niin kuin toinen jalka täällä Arktisessa keskuksessa ollut jo pitkän tovin.
Olen Marjo Lindroth, yliopistotutkija Arktisessa keskuksessa Lapin yliopistolla ja tutkin kansainvälistä politiikkaa, kehityksen kysymyksiä arktisella alueella ja toivoa.
Eli kriittinen tutkimus on semmoista, miten mä sanoisin, vähän niin kuin toisin katsomista ja tietynlaista utelua siitä, että todellakin ovatko asiat näin. Eli me lähdetäänkin niin kuin miettimään, että no miksi nämä asiat oikeastaan on näin, mitä se tarkoittaa, että ne on näin, kenen etua se palvelee, että asiat on näin.
Meidän tutkimuksessa on ollut ja näkisin, että kriittisessä arktisessa tutkimuksessa yleisemminkin niin valta on ihan keskiössä. Niin kuin valtasuhteiden niin kuin paljastaminen tai analysointi, millä kaikilla eri tavoilla valtaa käytetään nykypäivänä ja missä sitä valtaa on. Yksi asia tässä kriittisessä arktisessa tutkimuksessa olisi, että ei ajatella, että onko asiat nyt sinänsä hyviä vai pahoja. Että sitten voi ajatella niin kuin kriittiseltä kantilta, että kaikista asioista voi tulla hyviä tai pahoja, riippuen, että kenen käsissä ne milloinkin on, vaikka poliittisessa päätöksenteossa.
Tai ne voivat olla yhtä aikaa sekä että.
Kyllä,
ne voivat toimia hyvällä tavalla johonkin suuntaan, mutta sitten kenties olla vähän niin kuin haavoittavia tai toisten etuja heikentäviä. Arktisen tutkimuksen historia osoittaa, että meillä on paljon isoja kysymyksiä jotka jää tutkimatta siksi, että niitä ei tavallaan ole koettu relevantteina tai tärkeinä. Eli kyllä sinne jalkoihin jää paljon sitä elettyä elämää. Kriittinen tutkimus monesti tutkimuskysymyksiä, jotka joko yhteiskunnallisesti tai yhteisötasolla tai yksilöille on jotenkin niin kuin epämukavia. Ja niistähän meidän juuri pitää puhua.
Se on myös aina hyvä merkki, että jos mulla on jostakin asiasta jo hieman niin kuin epämukava olo, niin sitten siihen pitää niin kuin alkaa pureutua enemmän. Se, että ei niin kuin yritettäisi kaunistella asioita tai tehdä asiasta enemmän kiiltokuvaa kuin se on, mutta ei myöskään mitään kauhuskenaarioita, koska meillä täällä on niin kuin työvälineitä päästä asioista eteenpäin, kunhan sitten vaan niin kuin poliittiset päättäjät ja muut niin kuin ottaa niistä asioista kiinni. Mutta se, että me päästään niin kuin tekemään semmoista tutkimusta, jolla sitten on niin kuin jotenkin hyötyä tälle arktisen alueen hyvinvoinnille, niin pitää olla rehellinen niiden asioiden kanssa.
Mä kyseenalaistaisin sitä olettamaa, että nyt ollaan jotenkin hankalammassa tilanteessa kuin ennen. Ne tilanteet on ollut ihan yhtä hankalia ennenkin, mutta me ollaan vaan haluttu nähdä ne yksinkertaisempina. Ja se, mitä nyt se kriittinen tutkimus tietenkin on, että se pakottaa tavallaan niin kuin katsomaan vähän niin kuin joka nurkan taakse ja miettimään asioiden moniulotteisuutta ja monikerroksisuutta.
Eihän se tänne ole tullut jotenkin tänne arktiselle alueelle mitenkään niin kuin yhtäkkiä, että silmät aukeaa, että ilmastonmuutos tai muita asioita. Että niin kuin sanoit ihan hyvin, että ei se ole mitenkään niin kuin jotenkin, että no nyt on kaikki ikävämmin kuin ne on ollut aikaisemmin, vaan ehkä sille on nyt silmät auennut sieltä muualta. Arktinen keskus on ollut täällä olemassa jo ennen kuin arktisesta alueesta tuli se sellainen niin kuin maailman mielenkiinnon kohde. Ja jotenkin, että Arktista on tutkittu täällä niin kuin pitkään. Minusta tutkimus on parhaillaan tosi niin kuin innostavaa sen takia, koska voit olla luova jotenkin siinä, miten sä lähdet niitä asioita katsomaan. Tai se on niin kuin, sitten niin kuin sinusta kiinni. Että se on siinä mielessä hyvin innostavaa, että siinä on ja toivottavasti tulevaisuudessakin on se vapaus.
Avaruus on äärettänyt meidän jälkeen niin ääretön. Satelliitit vaan jää, ei mitään kiertämään. Täällä ollaan. Täällä ollaan. Mä sanoin, että täällä ollaan. Ei se maailma vielä loppunut. Ei se maailma vielä loppunut. Mut ei oo niin helppoa. Tää, joka uskoo tulevaan. Uskoo siihen todella. Mä